Psychedelics are everywhere. Everyone's talking about psychedelics. Everyone is asking what types are safe and how they can finally resolve all the problems all the other methods haven't. Ayahuasca in Bali, mushrooms in Amsterdam, microdosing your trauma away during a Zoom call. Nowadays, you are even offered some shrooms on a random morning yoga class in just any studio in California. From Amazonian shamans to Silicon Valley CEOs, everyone seems to be drinking the same cosmic Kool-Aid. But behind the mystical visions and serotonin surges, something isn't sitting right. Welcome back to Chakra Capitalism. Today, we talk about the ancient roots, the modern chaos, and how some of us are coming back from these journeys with more trauma than truth. And now carry our low-grade, or not so low-grade neurosis as a badge of honor, not even knowing who's to blame. If you are a newbie, and maybe if you are not at all, let's take a look into what psychedelics actually are. Psychedelics, from the Greek psyche, mind, and delaun, to manifest, literally mean mind manifesting. The term was coined in the 1950s. Back then we called them drugs. Now we call them medicine. They are substances that significantly alter perception, mood, and cognition by acting primarily on serotonin receptors, especially the 5-HT2A subtype. Function: serotonin receptor agonists, mainly 5-HT2A. They don't show you the truth, they alter the filters between you and reality. They are not inherently spiritual, just neurologically chaotic. Examples include LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, a synthetic compound discovered in 1938, known for ego death, time distortion, and the 14-hour mental roller coaster. Formerly known as the rave drug, nowadays known as a spiritual accelerator. Psilocybin mushrooms, naturally occurring fungi used in Mesoamerica for centuries. Think colorful visuals and emotional catharsis. DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, a powerful, naturally occurring tryptamine that produces intense, often alien experiences. Found in plants, animals, and yes, trace amounts in your own brain. Ayahuasca, a traditional Amazonian brew combining DMT-rich chacranal leaves with Mao-inhibiting vine, or Banisteriopsis caapi, allowing DMT to become orally active. Used in indigenous ceremonies for healing, divination, and, more recently, sold to stressed-out businessmen on soul quests. Mescaline, found in peyote and San Pedro cactus, historically used in indigenous North and South American rituals. Described as heart-opening, visual, and emotionally intense. And their modern cousins like MDMA and ketamine, not classic psychedelics, but invited to the same party. The very important thing not so often mentioned is that they don't give you visions, they disintegrate the filter your brain uses to protect you from the raw intensity of reality. Now why is that something you are sold on as a cure, and not as a drug? We could discuss for days, but let's try and zip it into one video. If we limit ourselves only to the anciently used psychedelics, it's important to understand their ancient roots and how they were used in these communities. Before psychedelics were trending in Silicon Valley, they were central to ritualistic practices across the world, especially in pre-Columbian Latin America. The Mazatec used psilocybin mushrooms in healing ceremonies. The Shipibo Canobo and other Amazonian tribes brewed ayahuasca for vision quests and divination, even though, as we mentioned, they don't give visions, they just remove the filter. But how could these primitive communities know that, when it truly looks like those are visions? Peyote was part of sacred rites for the Huichol and other indigenous peoples of northern Mexico. But here's the nuance: these substances were used in strict ritualistic, shamanic contexts. They were not weekend getaways or 3-hour ceremonies with Spotify playlists. They were embedded in a cosmology, supervised by elders, and followed by real-life integration through community, land, and myth. You weren't supposed to just see your trauma, you were supposed to become someone new after weeks or months of real-life integration within the tribe supervised by the elders. Let's be clear, ancient cultures weren't microdosing before their cacao ceremonies or journaling their shadow work with ayahuasca every new moon. And they weren't used by regular people just like that. Who used them even? Shamans, curanderos, aka healers, and spiritual specialists, not the whole village. These figures acted as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual world. The psychedelic substances were seen as sacred tools, not recreational shortcuts or weekend experiments. How often have they been used? Rarely. Very, very rarely. Psychedelics were used selectively. During seasonal rituals, for example, solstices, harvests. For healing or divination in extreme natural circumstances. Most regular people never touched these substances unless something was seriously wrong with them, like illness, a cursed crop, or a spiritual emergency. As in, they've been lost anyhow, so what's the harm in trying something drastic? Not everyone tripped. Not all the time. Not for fun. So fast forward to modern psychedelia. Now we peek, purge, and post a Substack story about how it changed our lives. In today's healing economy, psychedelics have been commodified. Ayahuasca retreats are booked through Instagram DMs. Someone then calls you because they don't want to leave written traces. Guess why? Tells you not to use the word explicitly, so you now call it medicine, she, abuela, abuelita, the vine, the plant, and so on. People microdose to get a promotion and feel uplifted, not knowing, to start with, why they were even down in the first place, but God forbid they think that down might have maybe been the actual wisdom of their bodies. We're seeing psychedelic capitalism, basically burning man with a pitch deck. And the problem isn't just the molecule, it's the context collapse. The brain is being opened. But there's nowhere to safely put the pieces. Integration has been replaced by journal prompts, shadow work memes, and that friend who keeps saying this is just my truth. Let's zoom in into what is happening in the brain when you take psychedelics. From a neuroscience perspective, you have something that is called default mode network, DMN, the system responsible for ego, identity, and narrative. This one goes offline. So now, out of nowhere, you don't have a clear sense of ego, identity, and a narrative of your life, the world, etc. Remember those people from the movies who lose memory? That's your brain on psychedelics. You don't lose the memory, but you can't really connect the dots into any meaningful structure. This is what is happening with the cognitive part of your brain. Your neural pathways light up like a Christmas tree. The brain enters a state of entropy, meaning it becomes more random, flexible, and interconnected. Now imagine how disorienting that is for your emotional brain and for your amygdala. If you don't know what that means, we will soon make a video on this topic. Subscribe and stay tuned. It's free. But in short, your emotional brain is in charge of your emotions, that much you know, so when you remove the cognitive part, that one starts purging. In theory, now whether that's really true or by removing this safety net you actually provoke the need for purging when there might have been none beforehand. That's a long discussion. So now we come to your amygdala, which is basically your smoke detector. Safe versus unsafe scanner. When something is known, that usually gives the signal, safe, all good, so this part of the rest says okay, I can chill. The unknown, especially when not paced in the way the reptilian brain can catch up, sends a signal, new, potentially unsafe, check, analyze, but for the love of God, don't chill. So now imagine what that Christmas tree brain that has dropped all the security filters does to your amygdala. You don't need to imagine. Your amygdala, the part responsible for fear and survival, not only gets overwhelmed, but is now also hypersensitized, so the overstimulation of it is now multiplied. This, paradoxically, is part of the healing arc, where in theory, by removing the filter, we should convince the amygdala into safety, as unsafety is the root cause of all trauma, but without proper containment, that sensitization doesn't shut off. Especially when people take psychedelics frequently, or without integration, this can lead to chronic overstimulation, heightened and prolonged fight or flight response, dissociation masked as spiritual detachment, and eventually, low-grade or full-blown neurosis. Here's the controversial part. When your brain is repeatedly exposed to high-entropy states in questionable environments, your amygdala begins to signal constant, low-grade danger. This happens even with full conscious catharsis. While on psychedelics, this effect is hundreds of times stronger. Which more often than not leads to insomnia masked as downloads at 3 a.m., anxiety mistaken for energy shifts, isolation repackaged as protecting my frequency. And the problem is, you don't associate these symptoms with the psychedelics because you were told the experience was healing. You're just processing. You're breaking through your ego. You're not crazy, you're quantum. No. Sometimes you're just chemically disoriented, overextended, and spiritually gassed up. You are left chasing meaning in visions you can't metabolize, while your nervous system quietly slips into dysregulation. That's not awakening. That's just how to become neurotic 101. So what's the solution? Honestly, don't do it. There is really no benefit in exposing your brain to drugs, ever, for any reason if you are just a normal, regular human being that has no severe issues and a horrific, otherwise incurable something diagnosis. If you don't do cocaine, well, don't do this either. Why would you? But if you are really in a place where you feel like nothing can harm you because you touch the point of no return, and believe that there is something life-saving in this, then pay attention to the following. Ritual context matters. If you're not embedded in culture, myth, or community, you're flying without a map. Your nervous system doesn't care about your insights, it cares about safety. Integration means bodywork, relationships, routine, and slowly rebuilding your baseline. Less is more. Repeated high-dose journeys without rest flatten the nervous system's ability to regulate. Watch for spiritual bypassing. If you can't feel grounded joy, if everyone feels unsafe, if the world feels fake, your system might be off, not the universe. Just leave. In theory, psychedelics are sold like something that can show us the divine. In practice that means, you notice flowers now, you are in touch with something new. But honestly, just notice the damn flowers anyways and practice noticing new things around you. If you are depressed, seek connection with other safe humans. Be a safe human to others yourself. Go to therapy. Do the work. And everything you are hoping to achieve with the magic brew will unfold, only without the irreversible side effects. Psychedelia can be exciting. But more often, it's the new neurosis in disguise. Just because you saw the light doesn't mean you're healed. And just because you met God in an altered state, doesn't mean you're not still scared of your own life. Subscribe if you're tired of spiritual BS. Comment if you've seen the cracks in the healing machine. Share with someone who thinks medicine only comes in brew and pill form. And tell us what topics you want to see on chakra capitalism. We are eager to dissect it all.